let's talk stereo systems or home audio or hi-fi equipment, as in high fidelity equipment, if you want to get really fancy about it. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, if people wanted to go and listen to music in a high quality format, you would actually go to your house. Mind-blowing, I know. But again, the home stereo system was the big investment back in the early 80s. You would either buy a stereo system that was integrated, which means you would buy one piece of stereo equipment that essentially had the record player, the FM AM tuner, receiver, and the cassette deck. And if you were really fancy, you would have 2 cassette decks. Or if you were an audiophile, you were willing to really drop a lot of coin, you would buy stereo components. So just like people build PCs today, you would essentially build your stereo system. People still do it today, obviously, but back in the 80s, this was kind of the thing to do. So you would buy a special turntable component, you would buy a special FM AM tuner, receiver, equalizer component, you would buy the dual tape cassette deck component. And there was a huge market for this back in the early 80s. There were stores dedicated to this. There were magazines dedicated to this. So it was a really big deal to put together sort of a very high quality stereo sound system in your home, because essentially that's where people were going to listen to music and expecting it to sound really amazing.
One touch.
Sensory
Intelligent Super Combo.
One touch.
From Quartz Lock Stereo Tuner.
One touch to fully automatic turntable.
One touch to auto reverse cassette deck.
Just one touch.
Just one touch.
The Sansui Intelligent Super Combo.
No other stereo component system gives you so much pleasure with so little effort.
The other thing is you have to remember is that music is in physical products. So you have your stacks of records. You have your stacks, I don't know what you would call like a stack of tape cassettes, but you would have a lot of physical product. And then obviously add to that a little later in the 80s, the CDs, right? And the CD player was also added as part of the stereo component from the mid to late 80s. So again, you have essentially a library in your house that's dedicated to the highest quality sound and to all of your music product. So a pretty big deal. But again, as we talked about in the last video, it's not portable, right? You can't really take your stereo with you. It needs a power cord, not to mention it's insanely heavy, very fragile, very sensitive audio equipment, so you don't want to be like throwing it around. So unless you were moving, that's basically the only reason you would move your home stereo system. Also a lot of wires, a lot of cables, line in, line out, auxiliary, etc. So your stereo system stayed in one place. So now we go to the beautiful boombox.
In your eyes, the light, the heat, I am complete.
Now in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was portable transistor radios and eventually portable transistor radios with a tape recorder. But the boombox was essentially the first kind of high-quality audio equipment that you could take outside, right? You've got speakers, you've got AM/FM stereo, you've got a tape deck, obviously not a record player, but still, and portable power supply, as in a lot of D batteries.
20 D fucking batteries.
Now, if you think about it, you can play your music to a bigger audience. You can play music now out in the street, in your neighborhood, in the park, and you essentially have a bigger community to hear your music. And also, it's much better sound quality, it's a much bigger volume, and a lot more bass. So So boomboxes contributed to the rise of hip-hop culture because now you have a portable means of sharing and disseminating this music out in the streets to an enthusiastic youth street culture. You can share mixtapes. You can play your mixtapes instantly for a crowd outside or on the subway, wherever you share this music, on the basketball court, in the subway, on the streets, etc. And if you have your own tapes to play your own new compositions, so much the better.
The boombox is oh my God, let me see, how do I say this? It was instrumental, and here's the key reason. In the beginnings of hip hop, the way the music was spread around the city was by cassette tape. Many great DJs recorded their sessions at parties in the Bronx. The way most people in the city first got any inkling of this new music was by cassettes, which either were recorded from the actual mixing board from the party, or somebody in the party with a boombox recording live in the party. If you didn't hear it there, then somebody you knew, if they were cool enough, might have had a tape from one of these parties. The tingling I got when I first heard this new sound, this new music, it was just like, what is this? Where is it coming from? I gotta find the source. And that boombox, also known as that ghetto blaster, was that cool way of having that music portable.
Then in the 80s, bigger was better. A few models include the JVC RCM90, featured in LL Cool J's radio video, and a lot more. So the boombox became an icon along with other aspects of urban street culture in hip-hop and rap, including graffiti, including urban street fashion, and b-boying or breaking. That's the proper term for breakdancing. Now we go from big to small, the Walkman. The Walkman, as well as the boombox, is essentially why tapes took over in the 80s. Walkman was introduced by Sony in 1979, and by the mid-80s, tapes had completely taken over vinyl in market sales. So think about it. Now you could listen with two fuzzy headphones to your own music in high quality. Again, this is the 80s, so high quality for the 80s stereo sound. This is before the iPhone. This is before the iPod. This is before the shuffle. You can listen to all your tapes. You can make mixtapes to listen to, and you can, again, take them anywhere and listen to them all by yourself. You didn't have to share them with any audience. You didn't have to turn it down for anyone. Now you can travel with your Walkman. You can go running with your Walkman. You can exercise with your Walkman. And incidentally, with the rise of the Walkman in the 80s, surprise, surprise, people started exercising more.
Now you can lose inches off your waistline effortlessly, thanks to the new Super Walkman from Sony, the world's smallest cassette player. And while you lose inches here, with Sony's sound, you won't lose a thing here. The new Super Walkman, indisputably the world's smallest cassette player.
So the Walkman was essentially another revolutionary way to listen to music along with the boombox, because again, this was your own private home stereo system. The boombox was essentially your public outdoors, public announcement stereo system, party dance stereo system. The Walkman was your very own private stereo system. You're on the subway train and there's a creepy dude next to you. This could be a very good way to discourage people from talking to you that you didn't want to talk to you. And if you think about it, the rise of mixtapes, you're making your own personal playlists. You can listen to them all by yourself. It really does make a strong bond between the individual and their music. You could essentially have a one-on-one relationship with your music anytime, anywhere. When you're a teenager growing up in the 80s, this is a godsend. Towards the end of the 80s, the mini CD player or the Discman came out, so you could take your CDs wherever you went. It wasn't as stable as the Walkman. If you jostled it around or you dropped it, your CD would essentially go offline. They essentially built more rugged technology to handle the day-to-day trips and falls. I hope you enjoyed this video all about listening to music in the 80s, how we listened to music in the 80s. I have another video out that talks about the cassette tape, the record, and the CD, if you want to go and watch that. Please subscribe, like, share, tell your friends. And if you want to check out my music, it's at L.Arielmusic.com. That's L.Arielmusic.com.